Vanished without a trace, the mysterious disappearance of the Jack family. On a warm summer night in 1989, a young Canadian family of 4 walked out of their home, climbed into a stranger's truck, and was never seen again. More than 35 years later, their case remains one of Canada's most haunting unsolved mysteries. Ronnie and Doreen Jack, both 26 years old, were desperate for work when they encountered a man offering them a fresh start, a short-term logging job that came with childcare for their 2 young sons, Ryan, 4, and Russell, 9. It seemed like a lifeline, but it was a promise that would lead them into the abyss. What happened that night? And who was the stranger who sealed their fate? A family seeking hope. Ronnie and Doreen Jack were members of the Cheslata Carrier Nation, an indigenous First Nation located outside Burns Lake, British Columbia. Their early lives were marked by hardship. Doreen and her sisters endured parental abandonment, physical abuse, and time spent in the Lee Jack Residential School, where they suffered mistreatment. Despite these struggles, Doreen and Ronnie found love in their teenage years, eventually building a family together. Their financial situation, however, was dire. Ronnie, once a woodcutter, lost his job at a sawmill after injuring his back, leaving the family reliant on welfare. They moved to Prince George, hoping for better opportunities, but work remained scarce. At the time of their disappearance, Doreen had reportedly begun drinking heavily, and their financial state had deteriorated to the point where she resorted to stealing cough medicine for their children. Ronnie confided in his mother that he owed someone money, though the details remain unknown. August 1, 1989, 11:16 p.m. The First Leader pub in Prince George was dimly lit, the scent of beer and cigarette smoke thick in the air. Ronnie sat at the bar, nursing his drink, when a man approached him. "You looking for work?" the stranger asked casually, his voice gruff but friendly. Ronnie looked up, hopeful. "Yeah, I am. What do you got?" The man leaned in, lowering his voice. "Logging camp. Klukult's Lake. 10 days of work, good pay. We need a cook, too. Your wife can come. There's daycare for the kids." Ronnie hesitated. It seemed too good to be true. But they were struggling, and this was an opportunity. At around 11:16 p.m., he and the men left the pub and returned to the Jack residence, where Doreen and their sons packed their belongings. August 2, 1989, 12:30 a.m. Ronnie picked up the phone and dialed his mother. "Mom, I got a job," he said, excitement mixed with uncertainty in his voice. "Near Klukult's Lake. If you don't hear from me, come looking." There was a pause on the other end. "Ronnie, are you sure about this? Something doesn't feel right. It's only 10 days. We need the money." Mabel's heart clenched, but she didn't argue. "All right. Be careful, son." August 2, 1989, 1:30 a.m. Doreen's sister, Lorene, arrived at the house and saw the family loading their things into a dark-colored 4x4 pickup truck. She pulled Doreen aside. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, lowering her voice. "You don't even know this guy." Doreen forced a smile. "It's work, Lorene. We don't have a choice." She hugged her sister tightly before climbing into the truck. The headlights flicked on, cutting through the darkness, and within moments, they were gone. Weeks passed with no word from the Jacks. Mabel reported them missing in late August 1989. When police searched their home, they found their furniture, clothing, and even their children's school records left behind, suggesting they had no intention of leaving for good. The investigation was plagued with errors. On September 7, 1989, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, RCMP, mistakenly announced that the family had been found, causing the case to be briefly closed. Efforts to raise awareness were slow, hindered in part by the systemic neglect of missing Indigenous people. Then, in 1996, an anonymous caller provided what could have been a crucial clue. January 28, 1996, 7:45 a.m. A ringing phone shattered the early morning quiet at the RCMP detachment in Vanderhoof. An officer answered. "Hello." A raspy voice on the other end spoke in a hushed tone. "The Jack family, they're buried at the south end of the ranch." "Which ranch?" "Can you give us more details?" the officer pressed, but the line went dead. The call was traced to a house in Stony Creek, where a party had been taking place that night. Despite efforts to track down the caller, authorities were never able to identify him. In 2019, police searched land belonging to the Sakyusi First Nation near Vanderhoof using ground-penetrating radar. No evidence related to the Jack family was found. The Jack family's disappearance has been linked to the broader pattern of unsolved crimes against Indigenous Canadians along the Highway of Tears, a notorious stretch of British Columbia Highway 16 between Prince George and Prince Rupert. For decades, dozens of women, mostly Indigenous, have gone missing or been murdered along this route. Could the Jacks have fallen victim to the same predator? Or was their fate sealed the moment they entered that truck? More than 3 decades later, the disappearance of the Jack family remains an open wound. Doreen's sister, Marlene, has never stopped searching for answers. "I love my sister with all my heart. I miss her," Marlene said at a vigil last year. "I'm not giving up. I'm not stopping, and I'm not going away." Despite renewed efforts, the case remains one of Canada's most tragic and eerie disappearances. Who was the man who lured them away? What really happened that night? And why has no one come forward with the truth? Until those questions are answered, the mystery of the Jack family's disappearance will remain a haunting chapter in Canada's history, a chilling tale of trust, deception, and a family that walked into the unknown, never to return. Questions that still not answered. Who was the mysterious man who offered the Jack family work? Why did the police mistakenly close the case in 1989, and how did this affect the investigation? What role did systemic neglect of missing Indigenous people play in the lack of progress in solving the case? Could the Jack family's disappearance be linked to the Highway of Tears murders? Why did Ronnie tell his mother to come looking if they didn't return? Did he sense danger? What significance does the 1996 anonymous phone call hold, and why was the caller never identified? If the Jack family was murdered, where might their remains be? Was the offer of a logging job a premeditated trap? Were there any other witnesses at the pub that night who saw the men recruiting Ronnie? Why has no substantial evidence or credible suspects emerged after more than 35 years? Also some myths and misconceptions. Myth: the Jack family left voluntarily and simply started a new life elsewhere. Reality: they left behind their belongings, school records, and personal items, suggesting they intended to return. Myth: the police thoroughly investigated the case from the beginning. Reality: the RCMP prematurely announced the family was found, delaying efforts to solve the case. Myth: the Jack family's case is unrelated to other Indigenous disappearances. Reality: many believe their fate is tied to the Highway of Tears, where Indigenous people have frequently gone missing. Myth: the anonymous caller in 1996 was a prankster. Reality: authorities considered it a serious lead, but the caller was never identified. Myth: if no bodies were found, there was no crime. Reality: many missing persons cases remain unsolved without physical remains, but that doesn't mean no crime occurred. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more awesome content.